everybody. Welcome to CXC 2020. My name is Jersey Joes. I am the interim executive director of Cartoon Crossroads, Columbus.org. Thank you so much for showing up for, the Road to Infinitum with Tim Fielder and Stacey Robinson. Very excited about this. But before we start, gotta, thank some people, because after all, you were not charged to be here. There was no admission. Why? How can that be? Well, that's because CXC is a 501(c) nonprofit who operates largely from the generous sponsorship and donations from different organizations and individuals. I want to thank some of our sponsors: Ohio Arts Council, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, White Castle, the Columbus Foundation, Able, and Feasel, and all of the partner organizations who make this festival possible: the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, the Columbus College of Art and Design, Columbus Metropolitan Library, Columbus Museum of Art, Wexner Center for the Arts, and all the volunteers who have been moderating the chats on all of our live streams happening all weekend, and in the Discord, and particularly Aaron Polk, who has been a real hero in the CXC Discord, where you can go to have conversations in between events. Now, this event is a Zoom webinar where the participants or the panelists will be able to broadcast, but you, the attendees, will have your video and audio off. You can comment in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. It's also being simulcast across the internet on Facebook, YouTube, and the CXC Twitch. Now, I'm going to get out of the way, and I am going to hand things over to our moderator today, Stacey Robinson.
Hi, welcome everyone. Very, very excited to be here. This is going to be a really fun conversation with one of my best friends. First of all, thank you, Jersey. Thank you, all the sponsors. But, this is going to be a really light, fun conversation. I'm hanging out with one of my best friends, met in 2014. And we've been cool, killing it, collaborating ever since. So for the last 6 years. And I'm going to start out by quoting Tim Fielder, one of my probably my favorite Tim Fielder quotes. I put Negroes in spaceships.
This is true. I do that. What I do.
Right. So we're going to talk for the next half hour about the Road to Infinitum, and really briefly give a 30-year kind of synopsis of all the amazing things you've done.
30 years and 30 minutes, baby.
30 years and 30 minutes. Yo, let's get right into it. Let's get into it. All right.
Yeah, so I'm a visual Afrofuturist, graphic novelist. Can't jump like that anymore, like on the photo there. And I'm known for obscure works, known works, and unknown works, and I'm here to talk about that today.
Awesome. So let's get right into editorial cartooning.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, give it to us.
Yeah, when I came to New York back in January of 1987, I started working for the Village Voice. So the person who got me my first job was Darius James, who got me past the front door. Front desk at the Voice. And the first job I ever did was an editorial illustration for Greg Tate, who is one of these griots out there, and one of the founders of the Black Rock Coalition. And I did this illustration on Al Sharpton. I did editorial work for the Village Voice with early hip hop acts. Music illustration, tons of music illustration, which we'll go into later. And it was a lot of fun, but I was actually doing that work while I was in college. So I ended up dropping out of college just to focus on that full time. But as you can see from the images here, what I used to do was I would fuse a lot of Afro-centric elements with music, and I had a lot of fun doing it. That's what happened. I was the whole alternative comics community with people, I had dealings for about a millisecond for Screw Magazine and Art Spiegelman for a millisecond. And it was a lot of fun to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, there's no separating your work from the legacy of the the four founders, for example, Overton Lord and Pedro Bell and
right.
and we're all pulling from, even heavy metal, right? The heavy metal influence is definitely founding your work, it appears to be. And I know we talked about that in many ways. But as we get into the next, section of Afrofuturism, can you talk about, how you view Afrofuturism, but also how you view it in the context of your own art?
Great question. I'll just keep it real simple. When it comes to Afrofuturism, before it was coined by Mark Derry, we just called it Black science fiction. And I always showcased what I was doing from the lens of science fiction featuring Black characters. And that's something that worked well for me. And I've always done it for better or worse, paid the price for good and worse. And that's just one of the things that I've always done. And I enjoy it. And it's what I do. I don't really do anything else as well as that. So it's just something I've always been able to do. And I started with this project called Black Metropolis back in the late 80s and went into the 90s with it, where I was taking Yoruba religious themes of African deities and I was putting them in this kind of Blade Runner-esque kind of futuristic urban environment. But everything was fully rendered because, as you stated earlier, I was heavily influenced by heavy metal guys, Mobius, Inky Bilal, and I wanted to be like that. So that's what I ended up doing.
Awesome. And I may have lied, but earlier when I said my favorite Tim Fielder quote, however, you have so many dope ones that I cite you on. The other one, and I'm not even going to save this for infinitum, I want to get into it right now as we're talking about your foundational Afrofuturist beginnings and how you're thinking about that. Mm-hmm. And that quote is, "We deserve epic stories."
Yeah, we do. Why not? Why can't we have a hero that looks like you, or looks like your daughter, or looks like me, or looks like my daughter, in these massive storylines with huge armies and huge spaceship armadas? So I wanted to do a story that would be big in scale, where I would take all of these Afrofuturist elements, science fiction, large armies, but I wanted characters that look like me, look like you guys, look like our children, that we could see ourselves within the context of that type of thing. And some of the images I've done have been influenced by works like Sam Delaney's Nova, which had a huge influence on me. So I wanted to do stories like that, where characters were on a galactic scale, not a local scale, if that makes sense.
Awesome. So as we're talking about these epic stories, and you and I often have conversations around legacy and around IP. And you've coined two terms that I want you to talk about. And it's timely, we're right in this section, we're right on that slide actually, where we could talk about steam funk and then diesel funk. Can you talk to us about those?
So part of what I did was I took steam funk and diesel funk are not my concepts in terms of the terms. That's Milton Davis and Balagun Ajitade, I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And they basically are the first people that I heard use that term. As the term was out there, I decided, this is what I've been doing for years, since, the 90s. So I decided to take that idea and to apply it to my work, Mattys Rocket. And it worked out well. And I ended up naming my company after it, Diesel Funk Studios.
Awesome. So we have, I think we're tracking pretty well on time. Let's talk about your history in music.
Yeah, so I had mentioned the Black Rock Coalition before. It's a little known history that when I came to New York back in December 86, January 87, I ended up becoming a member for a little while of that organization. That's like with bands like Living Color, 24/7 Spies, a Michael Hill blues band, all those type of things. And I would do flyers for their early shows, the Stalking Head show. So I remember, I think the first one I did was Stalking Heads 88. So what I wanted to do was to do work that would, within the context of Black rock, was to merge science fiction with rock, with the George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins. And it was something that I really found comfort with as I got to New York, because it was so different than where I grew up. In fact, I remember cutting off the sides of my hair and having dreadlocks, mohawk. So I was, for a bit, I was about that life, and I drew it in my comics work.
Awesome. Let's talk about your mainstream comic history.
Well, you know, like a lot of cartoonists, you know, you grow up reading Marvel and DC comics and things like that. And that's ultimately what I fantasized about doing. I was never really a part of the early Black comics community. My thing is I was always with the British. So a lot of the British expats who came here to work during the late 80s and 90s, I connected with one gentleman by the name of Floyd Hughes, who is a Black British cartoonist, and he helped me get my start in mainstream comics with Marvel Comics. And I think the first thing I did was Conan magazine. I did pinups, and eventually that would segue into me working with Marvel Music. And with Marvel Music, I produced a 63-page, fully painted graphic novel called Dr. Dre, with a man with a cold, cold heart. And that graphic novel was never published. The rumor was Dre broke parole over some kind of weed charge, and so the book never went to press. But
Wow.
hopefully one day it will get published. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So, and let's keep it going. Let's talk about film and video games.
Yeah. So, like I've said before in other interviews, the comic book industry crashed during the mid to late 90s. And like a lot of guys, I had to make a decision, you know, what am I going to do to make a living? So I decided, you know what, let me go into something that I love. So I had a choice. I had to choose live action film or animation. And I chose animation. And that worked out really well because I had a previous experience working with Reginald and Warrington Hutland on their aborted Mothership Connection film, which was supposed to be a science fiction adaptation with all of the P-Funk All-Stars starring Clinton, Bootsy, Barney Warwick. What it was I've been working in film for a while. And as a result of working in film, that was an easy decision for me to continue for that once the comic book industry took a nosedive. And was going to do animation as a result of that, but ended up segueing into video game design. And for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I've worked formally for Ubisoft Entertainment, one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had in my life. But I learned so much technically about how to work. That's when I made fully, this was what, 99, 2000. At that point, I stopped working totally analog. I was all digital from that point forward.
Awesome. So this brings us up to, I'm assuming, around the time where maybe you and I met, where you returned to comics.
Yeah.
Animation.
So so basically what happened was I was in animation, doing my own animation. I taught game design and animation for years. And so I was away from the comic book industry for about between 12 to 15 years, from 2000 all the way to, I think I formally got back in 2013, 2014. And it was basically when you and John Jennings came over to my house and you took a look at my portfolio, which has all this unpublished work. And you were like, I'll never forget, you told me, man, this stuff needs to be published. And that startled me because it was the first time anyone had come into my environment that I didn't know. And I guess it took about a week for me to formally make the decision. Well, no, that's not true. This was a Friday when you guys came by. By Sunday evening, I knew what I had to do.
Oh, wow.
It would be another week or two where I had kind of gotten into a deal with someone to bring Mattys Rocket back into the comics fold. But eventually, I created Diesel Funk Studios for myself. And I decided to self-publish my own work. And that's what happened.
Awesome, awesome. So really quickly, because I want to talk more about Matt. Do you want to talk more about Mattys Rocket or?
Sure, I can do that. So Mattys Rocket, and hopefully this will, yeah. So I was one of those cartoonists where I was always in the orbit of other people who were much more widely known than myself, but I was always around. And as a result of doing that, I ended up having a metric ton of work that was never seen by the public. And in fact, this is going to sound strange. I lost a huge chunk of my early work back in the early 90s, which I would go on to recover in 2004. So much of my early work was recovered. And that was part of the thing that made me move back towards comics. So when I met you guys, you and John, I decided, okay, let me take Matty, which was in animation, and move it over to comics. So Matty, which is kind of a retro Afrofuturistic blend of all these different things that I love. I always tell folks, Mattys Rocket is you take Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, and you put the cast of Stormy Weather in, and you make Lena Horne the main character. That's what Mattys Rocket is. And I did that so I could have my parents, who are in their 80s now, give them the option to see action adventure with people who are around their age. Those things that they didn't see. So that's part of why I call it retro Afrofuturism, because it's filling in the gaps of the past, if you will.
Wow. That's interesting. And it's so appropriate that we're talking about this during CXC, because I remember one of my most memorable moments at CXC was actually with you and overhearing someone at your table, viewing the book and saying, wow, finally a woman over 40 in comic books, like featured as a hero in comic books.
Right.
I thought about that before. I had never thought about that until she said that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, the way we depict female characters. And when I say we, I'm talking about the way men generally tend to depict female characters. It's oftentimes overly sexualized. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do a character that was like my mother, like my wife, like my grandmother. And so someone who carries themselves a certain way in a world that doesn't always look favorably upon them, but they also can carry the day. They can save the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, Matty is definitely one of my favorite books ever.
Well, that book, it changed my life. It really changed my life. It really did.
That's awesome. All right, so in these last few minutes, Infinitum, coming soon.
Yeah. So I guess Infinitum is one of those things where one of the lessons I learned over the last really 10 years or so is not allowing to stop you. And so I've been told, no, this is not something you can do, or no, that's not something you can do, my entire life. And I decided I would no longer have that. So I came up with the story of Infinitum, which is about a guy who has a problem with, say, dying. I'll leave it at that. And I was approached by the New York Times in 2016, 2017, about doing this book, or at least doing the story, which at the time was only going to be about 20 pages long. And I pitched that to him, and obviously the New York Times passed. But it was for an Afrofuturism article, and it affected me so much having that taken away from me that I decided, you know what, I'm going to continue. So I continued on doing it, and 20 pages turned to 280 fully painted digital pages. And as I thought I was going to be just a Black indie comic book artist, I ended up signing with HarperCollins-Amistad, and I've been blessed. I almost killed myself doing the book. You heard a lot of my phone calls when I call you whining. And the book got done in March of this year, at least the final edited version. And we just finalized proofs, I guess about a month ago, and it should be at the printer now, and it'll be out January 19th, 2021.
I'm so excited for that.
Thank you, man. Thank you
for that. So a couple of other things I definitely want to get into with you. Like I said, you and I have talked about the importance of, we are both in our middle-aged, in the middle-aged category. Right?
I'm in the middle to late third quarter of my life. Yes.
Okay. So you and I have conversations all the time about the importance of establishing your own IP and your own legacy, right? And in this time, like, IP means something more than maybe a graphic novel, but it's a graphic novel that might be turned into film nowadays, right? Which is very likely. In the success of Black Panther and Lovecraft Country and the Watchmen HBO series and many other films starring or TV series starring Black people and issues that we've been wanting to address for decades. Talk to us about IP for those who are watching and why that's important to establish, especially in this time.
Right. Well, I would say this. I would say that IP, for those who don't know, that means intellectual property. This is a concept, a character, a story, a situation that you originate, you create. And it could be in any form. It could be in prose form. It could be in comic form. It could be in film form. And for me, because I think like a concept designer, I'm heavily influenced by Ralph McQuarrie and, Ron Cobb, who just passed away recently. These guys had such an effect on me that I was always about visual world building. And I created all these characters and these concepts that, ironically enough, were not appropriate for comics because, I'm one of those cartoonists, like, was told at a younger age, well, Black people don't read comics or Black people don't like science fiction. But I always had these visions, these ideas, and I kept doing that. And ultimately, where I am now is I learned that finishing work and having it in a finished form, being able to take something from a floppy to a graphic novel to a film is very important to me. I don't have an overly sentimental view on any medium, whether it be comics, film, or prose. I just like to have my stuff finished. That's what I like. So when I'm doing my stories, I'm doing them in such a way where they have the ability to cascade between all these different forms. And as a result of doing that, it allows me to not only structure and to finance and to build my own life, it allows me to prepare for the future. I was fortunate enough to raise nerds who are 19 and 20 now. And, one day if they want to take my idea and move it on into the future themselves, that would be a great thing. I was thinking about the late Vaughn Bodie's son, Mark Bodie, who I saw interviewed the other day. And he was just talking about how his dad set him up to do his work, to take that art style, to take that vibe into the future. But I'm hoping to be able to do that. Still got a lot of life, hopefully, in front of me. And I hope to be able to enjoy the fruits of the labor as Infinitum comes out. And looks like some interesting things are happening with Mattys Rocket in the near future when in the mainstream publishing space. And I'm looking forward to taking those IPs and moving them out into the mainstream. But also, I have a number of others that I want to do as well.
Absolutely. So, Tim, in this last maybe 30 seconds or so that we have, first of all, thank you. And
of course. And thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Listen, this is a great conversation. So give us your handles. Give us your, where can we find you on social media?
Yeah. So Facebook, Diesel Funk, Instagram, Diesel Funk, Twitter, Diesel Funk STU, timfielder.com, dieselfunk.com, mattysrocket.com, infinitumbook.com. Go to HarperCollins, look up Infinitum. You can buy the book early. You can go to Amazon. You can go to all of these different sites now, because that's the great thing about HarperCollins is the book is everywhere. And that's my handle.
That is awesome. Tim, want to thank you for your time. Jersey, want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jersey.
Thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you for CXC. It's been great to be here. And yes, one more
Very
thing.
quickly. Thank you, Jeff Smith. Greatly appreciate it, man.
Right
Greatly
on,
appreciate it.
right on. Thank you very much. All right, yeah, we'll see you in the very near Afro future.